Sukka Perek Dalet Halacha Yud Beis. Sukka sheish lo psochim rabim. A sukkah that has many gates, entrances. Yesh v'kosleh chalonis harbe. Let's go down to the Peirush and see what we're talking about. A sukkah that has many openings and has many windows, harezuk shero. Even though if you take all the empty space versus the closed space, usually the wall that the majority is open is not closed, is not considered a wall. By a sukkah it's okay. But no entranceway should be bigger than 10 amos. If the entranceway was more than 10 amos, even if it has a tzursa pesach, you have to close up an area of it. In other words, once you have tzursa pesach, all you have to do is make it close so that it is at least to the height of 10 tvachim. It is the open is more than the standing. Machon Nesher cites the brisa. The doven of a sukkah is like doven of Shabbos. That's what it says in the brisa. Even though before we learned that Shabbos, some things that are kosher for sukkah, are kosher for Shabbos, make a sukkah kosher. Here's the reverse. That's anything that's good for a sukkah is definitely good for Shabbos. They make anything a rishus hayochid, with the condition that they shouldn't be between any standing sticks. For example, if you have standing sticks as your fence, there should not be space between them more than 3 tvachim. Because in less than 3 tvachim, there's a din of lovut, and it's considered as if it was closing completely. Now, Shabbos is more than Sukkah, that they're on Shabbos we are stringent, that Shabbos is only when what's standing is more than which is open, which is not the case by Sukkah, which we just learned above. That they consider rishus hayochid, it has to, the mechitza has to be more than the open. And by Sukkah also, the porous has to be more than the kosher. The Magen Mishnah explains, and Sukkah, the third side, it's enough with a tefach. Now, technically, if there's only one tefach, you have 2 walls that are kosher, which we said are like a chov, or as we said an L in English, and therefore you have 7 by 7. Now the third wall is only 1 tefach. And when these 2 walls are opposite each other or parallel to each other, right? We said you need to place a piece of wood which is 4 tvachim next to one side within 3 tvachim, so you have 7 tvachim. But the actual 2 walls have to be real walls. Therefore, the Rambam writes here that here we're talking about chitzas Sukkah. By Hilchos Sukkah, the Magen Mishnah explains that where the tzursa pesach, even if you have a tzursa pesach, the Rambam writes you cannot have open space more than closed. We're talking about only regarding the third wall. Because the Mishnah, the Rambam should have written specifically that the third wall regarding in Halacha Beis and Gimel. Why does he talk about it here if we're only referring to the third wall? Meaning, if we're going to interpret this Rambam to mean only the third wall, but the first 2 walls have to be legitimate walls with the majority standing, why, as he mentioned it here, we'll turn the page. Therefore, because the Mishnah explains, the Magen Mishnah means that when the opening is more than the standing, it's only regarding the third wall. We find that they were makel on the third wall that's enough a tefach, which is wide, when you have the 2. In other words, what we said, it has to have 4 is when and it's enough for a area of 4 when it's made when you have 2 across from each other. In other words, when you have an L shape, it's enough to, a tefach. When it's parallel to each other, then you need the 4, as we explained in Halachas Beis and Gimel. And he concludes the other 2 walls, they have the din like the mechitza of Shabbos. Now, the Lechem Mishnah explains the words of the Maggid Mishnah, and therefore the Rabbanon mentioned this to teach us that only because on the 3rd wall it can be poretz mubal oimit, but the other walls are not that. That does not apply. And the lotion of the Rambam, when he says kosleho, which is plural, right, or many windows, it would seem that we're talking about all around the sukkah. That means other dinim that have to do with walls, but not with poretz mubal oimit, which is kosher regarding the 3rd wall. Because even if you have 7 tvochim, if you have a 10 tvochim wide, for example, and you have more than 10 tvochim wide, you have 20 tvochim wide, and you have a piece of wood that's on one side of the parallel walls within 3 tvochim, so your gap is from 7 till Zeturas HaPesach, which may be bigger than 10 amas. Talking about 10 amas, to make it if you have a Zeturas HaPesach, it's 10 amas. Otherwise, the 20 tvachim would be more than the 7 tvachim. In any case, so that's where we're talking about. The 3rd wall it can be poretz greater than the standing, because the halacha by Shabbos is that the 3rd wall can be Zeturas HaPesach, like the Maggid Mishnah says in Hilchos Shabbos, that even according to the Rambam, that the Zeturas HaPesach helps in poretz mubal oimid, as he mentions by Movi Mefulish. And if that's the case, if we're talking only about the 3rd wall, he questions, what is the Rambam telling us here? If we're talking about the 3rd wall, by the Sukkah can be more open and closed, so the same rule applies to a Movi on Shabbos also, the 3rd wall. We're talking about Movi Mefulish, which means there's only 2 side walls, the same rule applies. The Rosh cites that the Smag is opinions according to the Rambam, and he asks from the Mishnah Erevin that if there's more than 10 amas and there's a Zeturas HaPesach, it's called a machitza. You don't say that you have to enclose the majority of the area because it's more than 10 amas. And not like Rav, who says you have to minimize the area that's open. Because when there's a Zeturas HaPesach, there's no difference. The Zeturas HaPesach acts as a doorway. And a doorway can be as large as you want it to be. And you don't need to have to worry about, it's not called a wall. Zeturas HaPesach is an opening. Openings usually don't have things in the middle of the openings. Beis Yosef cites Rabbeinu Eliyahu Mizrahi, who explains that we don't know where the Rosh makes his comment then that Zeturas HaPesach is valid even if it's more than 10 amas. Where does he get it from? And maybe the Mishnah permits it, we'll turn the page, when you have a Zeturas HaPesach only when it's less than 10 tvachim. Because supposedly you tvachim and more than 12 tvachim, and not for everything is it similar, the Pesach, whether it's less or more, only that it's not mevatel mechitza. But the din poretz merubal oimed is only the pirtza less than 10 amas, it's kosher. But more than that, it doesn't help to us at Pesach. And to consider the oimed more on the poretz, like the Rambam and the Smag, you don't say that the Zeturas HaPesach will help. Beis Yosef say it brings the Maggid Mishnah's explanation that he learns the Brisa Yisera Shabbos ala Sukka. The Shabbos has an advantage over Sukkah. The Shabbos is permitted when the oimid is more than the poretz, which is not the case in the poretz. That even when the Poritz is Mubal HaOimed, it helps Tzuras HaPesach, that's a mistake there, only on the third wall. I should say with a Samach, with a Sof instead of a Samach. When you have two walls, Kilchosen, or by Movoy, Aval, but the first two walls, as we said earlier, the rule is they have to be complete walls. You can't have more openings than walls. The Magen Mishnah himself writes in the Hilchos Shabbos, according to the Rambam, if it's more than 10 tefachim or 10 amas wide, it's if it's more than 10 tefachim wide and it has a Tzuras HaPesach, it's considered like a pirza. And if the porridge is more than the standing, it's not called a machitza. But if it has a Tzuras HaPesach, maybe the Rambam would permit it. And he adds that, so the Rambam permitted by Sukka. Just that, maybe the Rambam makes a difference between Sukka to Shabbos, and he explains the question in Sukka, as we wrote above, is the question of whether by the Sukka you say the wall has to be a complete wall on the third side or not, whereas by Shabbos it would have to be a complete wall. Beis Yosef questions, or the Magen Mishnah argues that according to the Rambam, we're only talking about the third wall, but the first two, there for sure it has to be a wall where the majority is wall. It is the question, he shouldn't have written, the Rambam should not have written it here, because the rules of walls, the third walls, he wrote in Perek Daled, Halacha Beis and Gimel, and therefore he says that the explanation has to be like the Kesef Mishnah, that it's kosher when the Poritz is greater than the Oimed only regarding the third wall. That they were more lenient with it because we could really technically have a tefach alone in certain instances, or 4 tefachim, which are less than 3 tefachim on the wall. Therefore, we see that the Torah didn't require a full wall in the third wall. But by Shabbos, you need to have 3 walls to make it a Rishus HaYochid, and therefore Shabbos is more stringent than Sukkot with regarding to the opening. Shulchan Aruch paskins, when they said the 2 walls that are like an L are kosher, when that's when they meet at the corner, right? And the third wall has a tefach and a Tzuras HaPesach. As we learned earlier, it was the concept of 2 things, a tefach and a Tzuras HaPesach. Even if the first 2 walls have a lot of space, so here the Kesef Mishnah says, even if they have a lot of space, and we'll turn it off, but they do not have a Tzuras HaPesach, that we combine, if we combine all the empty spaces, it will be more than the standing. It's kosher, like the Rosh. And the Mishnah Berurah explains that if you take all the openings, the small openings that are found in the 2 original walls, with the 2 walls that are totally open, that's when the porous will be more than the Oimed. Then Tzuras HaPesach helps. In other words, what the Mishnah Berurah is trying to say is that you're counting all 4 walls, actually. We're including the first 2. If the first 2 are solid, so the tefach automatically gives you a majority of, out of 4 walls, more than 2 solid walls. But if there are holes in the first 2 walls, so then you've got a problem with the third wall, because there's too much empty space, and therefore it would require a Tzuras HaPesach to make the third wall a wall. But certainly the complete walls have to be kilchosen, and if each wall itself has more porous than standing, the Sukkah is psula. So basically the Mishnah Berurah, the Chavetz Chaim, is saying that porous omen al uba, the Rambam is saying each wall has its own law, and then we take the total of the walls also to see whether the total area is enclosed or not. So even if the first 2, each one has more than more closed than open, But when we add up all four walls, we will find that we have more open than closed. So then you need to have a Tzuras HaPesach to make at least a third wall kosher. The Ramah adds, in the name of the Ran, you shouldn't make the openings in the corners because the walls have to be attached to each other like a resh or a L. And if there is a opening in the corner where they connect, it's not considered an L-shaped. The Machon Nesher adds that it shouldn't have more than 10 amas opening. And if it has a Tzuras HaPesach, it's kosher even with more than 10 amas. So we understand what the Shulchan Aruch is alluding to. According to the Rambam, even if it has a Tzuras Pesach, if the area that's open between the two sides of the gateway is more than 10 amas, it's possible, unless in the middle you place something to make it more solid in the middle, then there's more space built up than empty. The Ramah adds, and today the minig is to do complete walls. Because not everybody knows how to make a wall, how to measure, and he says we get out of the whole problem by making complete walls. Of course, you can have a window, especially in Eretz Yisrael. You need a window for some fresh air. The Mishnah Berurah explains the intent of the Ramah that you should not try to use Lovud and Tzuras HaPesach. In the Hilchos Sukkah, he writes, I saw the mitzvah Mechuvah, they should have 3 walls, closed from all sides, meaning complete. Nothing should be open, only the entranceway to the sukkah itself, like the Ramah. Actually, the Melchus Zilber shlit says he saw in the Rae Gann, which the Mishnah Berurah didn't have, that this opinion jives with the opinion of the Rishon, the Rae Gann, and we have completed Halacha Yud Beis.